Welcome to another Sunday Live. Happy Sunday, everybody. Excuse me. I hope everybody's having a wonderful Sunday. We're getting close to July 4th, right? So it's kind of like a holiday weekend, but not really because Monday's still work day. so, right? So this is Karen here, your favorite virtual assistant. Today we have a wonderful guest, Amber Holloway, who's going to discuss parenting a transgender child. So, Gail, take it over. Let's get this conversation started.
Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Sunday Live Chat. I am Gail Withers, CEO and lead training consultant of Envision Training Solutions, where our superpowers are training your team on customer service, communication, leadership, and all of the other good stuff. Welcome, Amber, to our show. We're really happy to have you here as we talk about this very important topic that I think we would prefer to keep under the table. Our goal here is to educate and just bring some awareness to what
Mm-hmm.
happens to parents of transgender children. I'm all over my words today. So welcome to our program, and let's start the ball rolling by asking, like, when did you first realize your child was transgender? And maybe before we even get there, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My name is Amber Holloway. I'm a health advocate. And honestly, my son, I would say, probably always acted like a boy, always did. Was not into girly clothes, was against anything pink, anything frilly, anything lacy, did not play with baby dolls, did not play with Barbies. Just a tomboy through and through. And in high school, and I didn't ask. That is something that we each get to figure out for ourselves.
Mhm.
And so, even if I had suspicions, I didn't want to put my suspicions in my son's head. So, I didn't ask. I left that door open so that he certainly could come to me if he had questions or wanted to talk. But I didn't want to push him into a decision that's not mine to make. So, probably about his junior year in high school, he came to me and said, I'm asexual, I'm agender. I don't exactly know what that means, but I'm not interested really in anyone or anything. Okay, whatever. And we I come from a family that up top the women are blessed. And so that meant that he developed, and that was something that even before he even hit puberty, before he even started to develop, I was already catching him looking at um, plastic surgery sites and what a gender neutral chest would look like. He was already fearing what puberty was going to do to his body. And I picked up on that. I didn't push it. It was not something that kept him up at night. It wasn't something that I felt like really was a mental impact. So we kind of mentioned it to the pediatrician and just kind of, again, kept that door open. And so my son came out to me when he went to college, his second semester, and called me and said, I can't, I'm living in something that's not me. And every day is a lie. And being at college, living in a dorm with a female, didn't feel like he could get dressed when he needed to, was completely uncomfortable in the showers. And it became this complete shutdown for him. He didn't want to go to class. And so I brought him home in the middle of that semester. He was, I would say that was probably the closest I ever felt like he was mentally having a really hard impact. And again, we went to the pediatrician, and it wasn't something that he did not do therapy. Kids, some kids need therapy, some kids don't. My kid's a kid that was never going to speak to a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
He's too close to the chest. And this wasn't like a mental I'm going to harm myself. This was just I can't live in this. This isn't me. And it was more of a he didn't want to present every day as a fake.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he felt like. He was living in this was like just a different body that he was living in. So that I would say, I mean, he came out to me and was just like, I'm transgender. And that was, he was like, I've always wanted to be a boy. I don't know if you noticed, like I always try to mimic my middle child is my son. And so he was always trying to mimic his younger brother. And he was just like, that's just, it's who I've always been. And honestly, like he wore tux in his senior pictures. He was, the Mad Hatter, their senior prom was like for Alice in Wonderland. So he wore Mad Hatter and wore a tux and a top hat. Like plenty of signs along the way that obviously my child was not feminine whatsoever.
Mhm.
Not from the day that he was born was he ever feminine. So I was constantly trying to put him in a box, but he didn't fit.
Mhm.
Right.
Can you explain for us, because there's some gray area over the use of the term transgender?
Right? Transgender transgender means anyone who does not identify as a female or male. Flat out.
Mhm.
So if you're non-binary, if you're asexual, all of these consider and transgender, they're all considered within transgender because it means that you're something that your body is not. You feel a
Mhm.
certain way, you don't present. And there's a
Mhm.
detachment there. And that's pretty much what the transgender is. For my son, who was assigned female at birth, he wants to be a male. He presents as a male. And that can differ with everybody too. Like used to, transgender meant that you had to go through a complete transition, which meant hormone or hormone blocker, certain surgeries to make you either look more masculine or feminine, and then whether or not you had changes for your anatomy. Um, and a lot of people don't go all the way. A lot of them go where they can fit what that normal mode is. For a lot of transgender, if you change the chest, then most women, by the time they're growing the hormone, your face starts to thicken up a little bit, you get the beard on, then most of the time, a lot of trans males will continue like that and not finish transitioning, and that's enough for them to pass for
Okay.
society, for them to pass in society and be accepted as male. And so
Mhm.
they don't necessarily feel like they need to go that full transition. And it's up to every single person. That's whether whatever they want. So again, that's transgender is like this very, I think, along 20, 30 years ago, I think it was a very specific, it meant that you went from one to the other completely. And because I think our rules changed on what it meant to have your ID changed, to have your birth certificate changed, those things used to require like a note from your doctor saying a full transition. And then we went in and said, no, that it doesn't have to be that way. You shouldn't have to prove all this paperwork. So if you had done a few steps, name change, that kind of thing, you can go and get some of your other records changed now, depending on your state. That's the
Mhm.
way it is in my state, in North Carolina. And so I know that depending on where you're at, it does vary. But that was the reason why they kind of opened that. They laxed that law was so that you didn't have to have a full transition to be able to transition, to be honored as who you felt like when you showed up. Like even in the American, Medical Association, American Association of Pediatrics, they both say when somebody comes out like that, you're supposed to treat them that way. If they want to go by different pronouns, treat them by different pronouns. You don't have to have a sex change for me to honor you and respect you. And that
Mhm.
was really, I think, what the biggest part of it was making it so that people could be respected. They could be valued. And that is, well, we've already talked about it. Like transgender is just not something right now that is a topic that people want to discuss.
Yeah.
They definitely don't want to make it normalized, and it's a very polarized topic. So the more you don't speak about it, the less we know about it, the more it stays polarized,
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's
and,
true.
and that's what's going on right now. I mean that the fact that you've got all these states that one state like DeSantis pulls a move, and then suddenly you have other red states suddenly trying to pull that same exact agenda, and then you've got the court system in here going, no, 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 no. But it didn't stop the other red states, did it? They did it anyway. And that wasn't because they thought it was constitutional. It wasn't because they thought it was necessary. It's because of power. And that's their voting point right now. Transgender is the next voting point issue, the big issue. Like it was, they were trying to make it abortion rights because of Roe versus Wade being flipped. But honestly, trans is going to be their voting ticket for 2024. And that's what they're building right now. Look at all the legislation. There's over 560 across our country in the last 6 months,
Mhm.
all to target trans people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the bottom line, I guess, for you, Amber, your goal really is to make people aware, educate them, but then you still are driven to lean towards that mutual respect of the other
Definitely.
person as a human being. So, like when your son had that first conversation with you, like what did you say?
Honestly, I was fine because
Hmm.
again, I had seen this sort of coming. Like when he came out in high school as agender asexual, I think I kind of expected transgender then and didn't get that. Because again, he had been wearing tuxes and male clothing, and like I just kind of knew, felt like that's where he was leaning. Um, and so for me, I had been in a marriage about 6 years, 5 years prior to this that I had ended. And that
Hmm.
marriage had been like a very suffocating, controlling. My ex was a very mentally, emotionally abusive, controlling, narcissistic person. And so my marriage was a nothing but control. And when I got out of that, I realized, and the reason why I got out of it was I realized I didn't like who I was. I didn't recognize who I was in the mirror. And it was because I had been molded by him to be what he wanted me to be. It wasn't what I wanted, it was what he wanted. And so when my son came out, I looked at it the same way. The same way my husband had put me in this box and all these different boxes, I had done that to my kid. And all I had to do was take off the box. And that's what I did. Like for me, it was very because I'd gone through that situation. I looked at it. This is my kid. No matter what, this is my child. I don't care who you are, who you show up at, who you want to represent as. That is your choice to make. And my choice is that as your parent, I can say, hey, I love you and I accept you, or I don't. Well, that's easy for me. I love and accept my kid.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's true. So when it comes to family, right? I mean, every family have their own views, their own perspective of
Yep.
transgender. So how does that work? Like, how does that support come in? Let's say with the dad, with the child's, with your son, with your child's father. How does that work to kind of have that discussion with the father and
Well,
or
that
your
depends.
family or
See,
family in
that depends.
general?
See, the father depends on whether or not he's the father in their life. And my ex was not in their life. My ex had walked away when we got divorced. He kind of made it it's you and the kids or it's just me. He was like, I can't be a part-time dad. So my ex kind of like took off for 5, 6, 7 years before he reached, like he would send a happy birthday card,
Mm,
but that was about the only communication for a good 5, 6 years. So when my
right.
son came out to me, my son did not come out to his dad because his dad
Okay.
wasn't in his life.
Right. Of
In
course.
fact, he kind of questioned because my ex had moved states away. My son questioned whether he would ever come out because he knew what my ex husband's political beliefs were.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that was the big one. He knew what my husband's political beliefs were, and this was not it.
This was not it, right?
And so he did not, honestly, did not feel safe. And so my
Mm-hmm.
other children went and visited years before he ever made contact again to make sure that it was
Um,
safe for him to go into that environment because
mm-hmm.
there was no need to, for him, it was like, why am I going to open Pandora's box if that's just going to be a disaster? I'll just leave that door shut. And so he kind of let his brother and sister go down there and temper the waters and see is dad going to be okay with this? Is dad not going to be okay with this? I did that with my mother, with my parents. When he came out to me, I went to them and buffered that and was like, or to my stepdad and my mother. And when I went to them, my stepfather, who's a teacher, a high school math teacher, was like, what does he want to go? What does he want to be called by? Pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
He, him. Okay. That's it. Easy. My mother, absolutely not. Nope.
Mm.
Nope, nope, nope. Now, I was raised conservative, Republican, Southern Free Will Baptist in the South.
Mm-hmm.
And I got that from my mother and her family, and my father and his family. So, my mother's family, no, no.
Mm.
It took a year of me dropping hints to my mom, or not hints, but she would go say something about my child and start with she or her, and I'm like, him, he,
Mm-hmm.
and she would correct. And it took
Okay.
a while of doing that for her to finally. And so one day she goes, we garden a lot. And so one day she came home from the store and she's like, come over, I got to show you something. And I go over there and she's got like this long sleeve gardening shirt, but it's in the trans pink, light blue colors. And it's got like inclusion, love, equality, all of it on the shirt. And she's like, I got this for Abby. Do you think he'll be proud of me? But that was like her final, I accept it. But that took a year.
Right.
And my son's story is his to share. He's 25. So all of my family, other than my parents, live 2 hours east of us, 2.5 hours east of us. We go back for Christmas and Thanksgiving, if that.
Right.
It is totally his story to tell. I can go down there, see my family. How are the kids? Great.
Yeah. That's
If
good
he
though.
wants to go down there and tell them, that's his choice. But I can tell you
Yeah.
this, after years of Christmases and Thanksgivings, we got to hear the politics of my relatives. We got to hear the homophobia out of my relatives. We
Wow.
heard the transphobia out of my relatives. My son already knows he won't come out to my family because of what they had said for the last decade before he ever said, you know what,
Right.
I am transgender. He
Right.
knows they wouldn't accept him. And so he's just like, I'm not bothering. I don't see
Right.
those people often enough for it. And that almost some people would be like, it's cutting off your family. But you know what? Sometimes you have to choose family.
Right.
And I'd rather my son feel protected than not. And in my family, like I had family members who block or not blocked me, but disconnected from me on Facebook because of Roe versus Wade and because I supported
Wow.
it.
Wow.
And so if you think coming out for transgender rights, woo, that's a if they're against me and that's the only communication they have with me as my family. This is my brother, my dad's brother and sister. Disconnect.
Wow. There has to be. I mean, like you said, you don't see them all the time, so they're not
Nope.
really per
Nope.
se involved in your son's
I
day to
mean,
day
if I was
life.
around then, like if I lived there when I grew up, oh, it'd be a whole different story. But
Right.
that town was closed minded, narrow minded, and I left it for that reason. Like,
Sometimes you
I
gotta
left
leave
it for the
people.
racism that was taught in schools. My
Wow.
ex husband and I both were like, we're not raising our kids in this town. We won't raise our kids that school system because we went through it.
Right.
No. And we didn't like it. We didn't like what was being pulled in that school. And so we moved somewhere that was more diverse. And
Mm.
of course, now that area has rolled back worse than what my hometown was, but it's still, we're near Raleigh, North Carolina, and we're near a very blue county. We're near the capital. So we've got way more flexibility where we're at than where he would have been back home.
Back home.
He's not really safe. My son's not safe really in either county. Just not right now.
So let me ask you a question. I know, especially now, right? Like some people are accepted,
Right.
and some people just very idiots. You know, they have very foul way of thinking. As a parent, do you worry about the child's safety? Right?
All the
Because
time. All the time.
I would assume so, especially with
Um,
the way some people are very aggressive. You know,
well, to
they don't
put
keep quiet. They
last
don't.
year, last year we had this kid who was we had a kid that we knew that worked at a gas station.
Mhm.
We don't we don't know why he was targeted. It was questioned whether it was a hate crime because he was gay, and he was dragged into a gas station bathroom, his workplace, and stabbed to death.
Ooh.
Last year,
Wow.
19.
Wow.
3 days later, my son and my transgender son go into the Tractor Supply a quarter of a mile from this gas station. When they go to check out, the clerk asks my trans son, "Are you trans?" And my other son was just like, gave them the money for the dog food and was just like, "We're leaving." And when they left, he was like, "You're not going back in there." And that's the type of county I live in. You really kind of have to watch
Wow.
your back. I would not want my son to go anywhere by himself in this county.
Wow.
Nope.
But what kind of question is that, Amber? That's not a normal retail transaction question.
Right.
It's not. But that's where we're at in society, I think, right now in the US. That's what the last political, I would say, cycle did for this country, is that the things that people used to keep in their private conversations, whether it was at your kitchen table, in your living room, with your friends on the phone, that you didn't discuss outside the home. I think the former president took the band-aid off of that and
Mm.
said, whatever hate you have, whatever anger you have, whatever wrath you have, I want you to go out in public, on social media, in your friends' faces, in your neighbors' faces, whether it's at the grocery store, whether it's in your church, and I want you to tell them how you feel.
Wow.
Because we didn't do this before. We were polite. And suddenly we said, you know what, politeness is out the door.
Right.
And that's where this comes into this thing about, like, with trans, oh, you need to be exterminated. What? We have politicians that have said that.
The words that they're using, it's like it's causing other people who already have hate in their heart.
Gaslighting. It's gaslighting. You're
Yeah.
using rhetoric that you know will drive more
Right.
people who are already kind of like, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
about that. You're
Right.
driving them further into
Right.
their paranoia.
Mhm.
You're driving them further into their fear. And that's to stoke this, oh, we can't have that. You're going to turn me gay. Dude, no, that's
Right.
not how it works.
Yeah, it's
Right.
not contagious.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, I'm
I have
laughing
not
because it's
figured
so
that out.
incredulous.
Then
It's weird.
they think it's a disease. Like
Wow.
it's going to
Yeah,
just
it's
rub, like if you
insane.
hang out long enough, I'm going to rub off my gayness on you.
Yeah.
And
Right.
tomorrow, suddenly, oh, I like rainbow. That's not how this works, people.
Right. That's
Yeah.
And you
so
make that
insane.
choice. You make that choice as you grow up. That's your own experiences. That's how you become who you are. None of
Yeah,
us get to
definitely.
really, I wouldn't say nobody gets to choose that for anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree. I
I
agree.
agree.
That's
Yeah.
ours to
I
make.
think it's a lot to do with, first of all, there's a lack of education, lack of
Mm-hmm.
awareness. But you mentioned your mom and you growing up as a Southern Baptist. Now that's a very,
Yeah.
very strong
True.
cultural, spiritual,
Yeah. Well, it's all about the
in your
spiritual. It all goes
yes,
back to
yes.
spiritual. So
So you
pretty
don't
much
have
for me to
to
leave it, I had to
accept.
leave religion. I left
Yeah,
religion. But for this, I
yeah.
had to leave religion. There was no way that I could hold to something that said, and honestly, it wasn't that I had to let go of religion. It's just what everybody told me a religion meant
Hmm.
was not what I saw. What I
Right.
saw in the Bible was Jesus who sat with the lepers and the prostitutes and the criminals,
Yeah,
and that's who he broke
yeah.
bread with. He called them in.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, we're trying to say, oh, he would never. That's exactly who Jesus would sit with. It's the
Yeah.
trans people. He'd be out there with the LGBTQ waving the rainbow flag because all people should be
Our
loved
people,
and
all
accepted. And
Mm-hmm.
people,
that's what he
people.
taught.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
yes.
true.
So I think people
So,
are
so
struggling
when
to
I look at
accept
it, when
it.
people start using the religion, I'm just like, no, what would Jesus do? I'm sorry. And if you go really read the word, what Jesus would do is he would love,
Mm-hmm.
unconditional love.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
true. So let
Not
me
hate.
ask you. Yeah, but let me ask you, how do you ensure your child's mental health and well-being, right? Especially in a world where you just mentioned everything that people feel, and I'm sure there's some people very strong. They display how they feel
Yep.
strongly. So how do you ensure your child's mental well-being and wellness is okay, so it doesn't get affected?
It's mainly just making sure that checking in with your kid. And for me, like, because, well, I live with my adult children, I'll still live at home. So I know what's going on with him day in, day out.
That's good.
But for me, it's monitoring that. If he starts to withdraw, like the same things that most people do. If you have somebody who suddenly stops taking interest in the things that they had interest in, if they stop communicating with you in the way that they used to. So if they used to blow up your phone with messaging or call you and talk to you every day and suddenly they withdraw and they aren't doing those things, you need to check in with your kid. What's going
Right.
on? What's going on? Is something up? And for me too, the other part was just making sure that he was around doctors that were also paying attention to that. And for him, since he became an adult, he's gotten his care from Planned Parenthood. That's where he
Mhm.
gets his testosterone, but that's also where he knows that no matter what, he's respected. No one's ever misgendered him. They never question why is he coming in, like, why do you want to be on hormone? It's never from that like accusatory stance. It's always, hi, how are you? How are things going? How,
Mhm.
and because like with my son's taking testosterone, and because of that you get like acne breakout, you get certain like symptoms, side effects. And so the first thing they do, so this is going on. So are you having the skin breakouts? Are you having this? How's that affecting you? How's that affecting your mindset? Emotionally, how are you checking in? Are you okay? So they're checking in as much as I'm checking in and making sure that you have a pediatrician. Like, so when my kid was a kid and came out as asexual and agender, the first thing that I did as a parent was called my pediatrician. Because actually, my son sent me an email. So I didn't even have to talk to him. My first thing was dial the pediatrician. Hey, I just got an email. I want to be the good parent. I want to respond in a way that is empathetic, encouraging,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't shut them down, doesn't push them away. So give me some guidance here. What do we need to do? What do I need to bring him into you? Do we
Right.
need to go to a therapist? Like, what do we need to do? And he was like, is he asking to go to a therapist? Because he knew my child. He'd been seeing my child since 2. And I was like, no, they're not asking to see a therapist. In fact, they're adamant that they don't want to see a therapist. And he was like, then don't push them. Like, they don't. And again, he knew that child, and that child has been my strongest willed kid. Just, I mean, this is intact. Like, never a worry there. So he was just like, if he doesn't feel like he needs therapy, then don't push that.
Mm-hmm.
And if he needs to come in and see me, I'm happy to see him, but don't push him to come and see me just because he came out to you. And so we didn't. And I went by that. That was exactly what I went by was. So that's what I kind of tell parents when your child starts either comes to you and says something that kind of is along the lines of, I don't identify. I don't think I fit in male. I don't think I fit in female, or I just don't feel like I fit in my skin. The first thing to do is, okay, let's talk about it. Really easy as a parent to say, let's just talk about it.
Right.
And instead, I think the problem is a lot of parents get caught up in when we get pregnant as moms, we go, oh, I can't wait. When this little boy comes out, he's going to be a policeman or an astronaut or a doctor. Like, you go ahead and start making this plan for them. Your daughter's the same way. But our children rarely ever come out and do exactly what we dreamed they would do because those were our dreams, not theirs.
Right.
And so for me, I'm always just like, take the rails off. And when they need guidance, okay, let's put you back up on the road. You're kind of getting off the road a little bit. But other than that, I'm going to let them follow their own path because I didn't want anybody choosing that for me. And it was chosen for me in a way. Like, I
Yeah.
kind of got always placed in that. You got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I hated it. I didn't
Right.
want to do those things. And so for me, I'm just like, do
I have,
burn your own path. If that's what you
yeah.
have to do, burn your own path, babe. Like, and
Burn
that is,
it.
as an adult, that is where I have moved into my 40s, is like, don't let people push you around. Don't let people get in your way. If you have a dream, if you have a goal, figure out how to get it. If that's what makes you happy, go after it. And my choices, my beliefs have nothing to do with that.
So Amber, I had a question for you.
Mhm.
Um, what advice would you give to a parent who is very against their children coming out? They don't think it's right. They
I
don't
would say
believe in being
the
gay,
best.
being transgender, being anything, and so you're coming out to your parent. I mean, I guess as a child, you may or may not know this about your parent to begin with, but here I am, and I'm a parent, and I'm opposed to any of this. What advice would you give me other than not saying you got to be crazy? No, this is not the conversation we're having. This is how
I
you
don't
were
think I would ever
born.
say no, you're crazy. I think the first place I would come from is why.
Hmm.
Why are you opposed? What's wrong with being trans? What is it that you feel as a parent? What are you scared of? And that's what I would unpack, because that's what's going on with the parent. The parent is scared. The parent is like, oh my gosh, my kid's picking something. Look at what trans people are up against. No parent wants to think that their kid is selecting to go into that group that are now going to be ostracized,
Bullied.
Right.
discriminated against, like, I mean, hated on. No parent wants that. And I think that was like one of the tiny little things, like, oh my gosh, my kid. Because that's your fear. We want to protect
Mm-hmm.
our children. And so I think the first thing for them is the parents that are completely opposed. Please don't share that with your kid. Go see a therapist. Go talk to your doctor about that. Please don't go talk to your pastor about it. Um, this is a choice that you get to make. That choice is, do you keep the relationship with your child or do you lose it?
Mhm.
And if you start putting your political beliefs down their throats, if you start shoving your religious beliefs down their throats, your ethical, moral beliefs down their throats, you can forget that relationship.
Mhm.
Your kid is not going to feel safe around you. Your kid is not going to trust you. Your kid is not going to want to be in conversations with you.
Mhm.
That is when your child goes, you know what? I'll go choose my own family.
Mhm.
And that is why I have my room. My room is about opening up that conversation. And that's what needs to happen is a conversation. And it's the
Right.
conversation with the parents because this isn't the kid's problem. This is the parents' problem. And they shouldn't be hashing it out with their kid because, again, that's them projecting their fears on their kid. They need to be talking with somebody who can give them help,
Mhm.
Yeah.
have them clarity.
So, Amber, does your son work?
Not right now, no. And the reason being is he's not changed his IDs. And I, as a parent, told him he could stay home, and I didn't. I don't want him to work until those IDs are changed. I
Mhm.
don't want an employer to ever be able to dead name him or misgender him. And I just feel like if he started his work journey as one and then comes out, changes it to something else, somebody can use that and go back against him on it. And I really just feel like this keeps him better protected because he's not changed his name. So changing his name, changing the birth certificate, changing the ID sets this new identity that once he goes into a workplace, that's always who he is from now on. Nobody can go in and go, well, once upon a time you were this. That's not there. That history's not there. So
Yeah.
I
How?
kind of just told him. So we had the pandemic, and because the pandemic happened, he was staying at home anyway in the bubble like we had with our family. And so he went back to school and got 2 associate's degrees while he was in, or while we were locked down. And so now he's kind of doing contract work from home. So for the moment, small wise, but that's until he again changes his IDs and stuff, and then he will go out into the workplace. But yeah, given the red county that I live in, given the state that I live in, I just felt like this was safer.
Yeah. How hard is it for transgenders in work, in the place of work?
Hard, really hard. Um, and I would say transgender females have a harder time than transgender males. They really do. I don't know why. And that's for any legislation. When you look at the sports bills, they're for transgender girls. It always comes back to the transgender girls. It's not about the transgender males. They're less offended by the transgender males. Um, and so yeah, when I look at any of them trying to get work, I've got friends that are local to me that are trans adults that are like my age, and they have had problems with employment. They're having problems now. Now that this
Mm.
now that this is being politicized so much, is polarized so much, like they're starting to get flack at work. They're starting to get flack from other people outside of work. At the same time, this person's also getting a lot more support than they used to get. So I think it's again whenever I talk to people about it, to me it reminds me of the early 2000s when the U.S. started to they were trying to legalize gay marriage. They were trying to make it where homosexual couples could adopt, where they could have two fathers or two mothers on a birth certificate, and all of those things were getting major pushback. And then you notice that shows like sitcoms like Will and Grace started to be produced. You had artists, music artists coming out as gay. You had Hollywood actors and actresses coming out. And because of that, by 2010, everybody was kind of like, gay rights, have them. You can get married. You can
Mm-hmm.
adopt. You can do what you want. But we had to have 10 years for this country to kind of get used to that idea to take the temperature down. And I don't know, but I feel like that's what we're doing with the trans thing now. I feel like now that it's come out, I think in about 10 years, I don't want it to be that long, but I think in 10 years, this won't be nearly as heated a topic.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah,
So,
I
so
agree.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. So, what would be 3 tips you would give to a parent of a transgender child? What would be 3 tips for them to start practical? Because I know this is a very
Love
challenging topic for
it.
some
Well, it is a
parents,
challenging
right?
topic.
Very
I would say
sensitive.
the three biggest ones. Accept your child for what they tell you. Don't push back on it. No matter what it is. I mean, they may just tell you, I don't feel like a male or female. They may not know what
Mhm.
that is. And again, that's where you go in and bring in the therapist and the
Mhm.
doctors, because your child is trying to figure that out for themselves. And if my son had been confused and needed that extra service, I would have pushed that. But his pediatrician understood his personality, and so did I, that was just, my son is one of those that, nope, this is how it is. Once he determined that, and it was always kind of there. So the first one is most definitely listen to your child. The second would be have the courage to remove your beliefs, to remove your ideologies, to remove your religion from the conversation, and look at your child as a human being.
Yeah.
The third tip is it's your kid. Do you want your kid in your life? That's it. Do you want your child in your life? And I'm not, and some people would be like, oh, that's letting your child, let society warp your kid and now your kid's blackmailing you. No, it's saying that we all get to choose who we are, what we believe, who we show up as every day. And I don't have the right to tell my kid to show up as something that he doesn't believe he is. I don't have the right to tell anybody to do that. So I'm not going to do that to my kid. And that would be my third is just, yeah, you have,
Yeah,
it's your
Amber,
child.
because
Thank
it's
It's
you.
your
not
child.
easy.
It's your
It's not
Yeah.
child.
easy, but
And
it's
It's
your
not
child.
it's
easy.
hard for me for parents because I've counseled people, I've counseled adults on LinkedIn who were trying to leave their homes, young adults trying to leave their homes because of the conflict that was going on with their parents pushing back and wanting. I mean, I had one beautiful person who their parents were trying to shame them constantly in public, dead naming them, mocking them for wearing feminine clothing, you name it, to embarrass them to the point that they would detransition. And this person was like 24 years old. And I can't think of attacking another human being and saying you
Right.
can't be who you are. I can't. And so my best advice for her, I asked her to leave. I said, I need you to find a safe space because when you come home, the world is ugly enough for trans people. Their home should always be support. Their home should always be base. It should always be the safe place. And if it's not, you need to find a different one because with all the stuff that they got going on, they need to be able to come home and decompress. And that's what I told her. I was like, when you come home and your parents are still putting all that the world was already putting on you, that your workplace was putting on you before you came home, you're never getting a break from that. And that's a huge mental strain. That's the reason why that group has such a high suicidal ideation threat. It's why so many of them harm themselves. There's a lot of mental health, just a lot of mental health distress within that group. And yeah, and that's the reason why. So for me, that's what I told them. I was like, I need you to go find a safe space. You're an adult now. I need you to go find a safe space. And since then, much, 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 much happier. And like I told them, leave the door open for your parents. Like maybe they will see you out here living your life, being happy as you want it. And maybe that eventually that will give them the courage to go, you know what? Maybe it's not so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's call them up. Let's open that door again. Let's
Right.
open that relationship. But you got to give them time because, like I said, my mother took a year.
Hmm.
A year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And,
That's
and
true.
and that was your mother, Amber. Imagine somebody
Right.
who's not
Your
related to
mom.
you. It's
And
gonna
Hmm.
then
take
that's my
her
mother who
probably
lived in an attached
longer.
apartment next door. So it was like, it's not like we didn't see one another constantly. This was somebody in her life constantly that she still was like, I can't accept that. This still took a year. So yeah, that's another reason why my son was just like, if your mother took a year, do you really think I'm coming out to your family back there? And I was like, yeah, no, I wouldn't do it either. I wouldn't. It's safer
Yeah.
for him. And there's again, it's that these are my elderly relatives, right? My dad's siblings and stuff. So my kid has like that very limited relationship of we saw them once a year. that's up to him if he wants to put himself out there for that.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
people from our older generation, they have their own set of values.
They do.
So so sometimes it's
This is,
hard
I mean,
for
this
them
is very
to.
different for them. And that's the reason why, like with my
Very.
mother,
Right?
I
Yeah.
said, you kind of had to like, to me, it was like kind of having to trickle in. Hey, Abby did this today, or hey, Abby started his hormone, or hey, Abby's beard is getting really thick compared to his brother's, just to kind of keep putting that in her head that my son was a male.
Mm.
I just kind of kept having to kind of amp those characteristics, whatever was going on with him, just to kind of get her in that mindset. And even now, and I'll give this your audience a little hint. If you screw up and accidentally say she instead of he, it's easy. I'm sorry.
Right. Because it takes. I mean, let's be
It's gonna
realistic.
take time.
I'm about to say the same thing, Gail. It takes
And people get really
time.
upset and they're like, oh no, I just misgendered somebody. What do I do? I'm sorry. I do it. I still do it. Like I
Yeah.
still do it to my son on occasion. And when I do, it's automatic. I'm so sorry. And we roll right on.
Right.
But I'm acknowledging that I screwed up, that I disrespected him, and then we move on.
Yeah.
And I
That it
think
Right.
that's
wasn't
what that is. If
intentional.
people would realize that they're not being demanding, they're not saying, oh, you got to call me this or that. When you walk into your teacher's classroom, you ask them, am I supposed to call you Miss or Mrs.? That's a sign of respect. When they tell you they want to be called he, him, or they, them, it's a sign of respect. And that's what we used to do for the people that we met was we gave them respect and we treated them the way they wanted to be treated. And there really isn't anything different to this other than it's outside the normal of
Right.
what people want to think is normal. That's the only difference. And so if you take that normal label, get rid of it. Okay, we all show up and we act the way we're supposed to act. I'm going to
Yeah.
respect you. You respect me. We're all going to get along fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank
Our
you. Oh
very
my
last
God.
question, our very
Yeah.
last question, because I know Karen was going to ask it, Amber, going on exactly from what you just said. So
Mm-hmm.
you gave the three tips for the parents. What are your three tips for um, your transgender, sons and daughters? Because they have to know, understand it's going to take time. People may,
Yep.
um, not, they might take a little while to accept you, stuff like that. So what would be your three tips for them?
The first one is don't give up. Don't back down. Do not let somebody put you back into a box, put you back into a label. And you be exactly who you are. It's already courageous that they have to show up, right? Like that is a lot that they're up against. Even as kids, it's a lot that they're up against. The
Mhm.
second thing would be um, if you're getting flack from the people around you, like if you're getting pushback from them, give them grace, give them space. This is something new. It's not easy to just automatically go, oh, I'm going to switch and go to this. It's
Yeah,
not,
yeah,
especially when it's family members who have wrapped their whole identity around, like your parents have wrapped around that you're my little girl. And then you come out as something else, or you're my little boy and you come out as something else. So, again, give your parents that grace and space and the people around you in your life to get accustomed to it,
Mm-hmm.
to realize, okay, this is what they've decided, and I'm going to have to shift this language that I've always used, that it's not an overnight process. The third one would be for kids. If you're feeling alone, if you're feeling like you might harm yourself, reach out to somebody that you trust. If it's not your family member, fine. It could be a teacher at your school. It could be someone within your community at like a YMCA center. It could be a coach. It just could be a friend. It could be some of your friends' parents. I had kids, like my son's kids. I had a lot of friends, his friends, that would come to me for advice because they didn't feel like they could speak to their own parents. So again, if you have someone that you do feel like you can speak to and you get into that place where you want to hurt yourself, where you hate yourself, there's like
Mm-hmm.
you've got some mental stuff going on, you need to reach out for help. And if your parents aren't willing to do it, find another adult who will. Because like I said, you can go to your teacher who will at least get up with the counselor at school. And it may not even be the teacher. Just go to a counselor. If you have a counselor at your school you trust, go to the counselor. Youth group counselor, like any of these solutions, just somebody that you feel safe with, that if you start feeling that way, you do need to let somebody know.
yeah.
Yeah. That's some good, great tips. Can you get good, great tips? But in closing, Amber, how can
Mhm.
they reach you? How can people get connected with you?
Right now, the best way to get a hold of me is LinkedIn,
Yes.
at Amber Holloway. And I, like I said, my email box is typically pretty full, and I get back to everybody. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, I get back to you. Um, and yeah, for whatever you need. Like, if you need an hour of my time and you need 15 hours of my time, you got it. That's the person that I am, especially when it
Okay.
comes to this. Trans rights right now. I speak for women's reproductive rights, domestic violence victims, a lot of different platforms. But trans rights right now are one of the biggest because of just how political,
Yeah.
polarizing it is right now. Like, and that affects my son because the legislation is determining whether he can go to where and when he can go to a bathroom, when and if he can get any treatment by the state, or in private, public, you name it. We even have a bill that they're trying to pass in my state that will say that medical professionals will be able to choose not just on their religious ideologies, but also their political or their moral ideologies on whether or not to treat a patient. And that's
Mm.
not the nurse or the doctor. That's the nurse, the doctor, the scheduler, the dentist, the pharmacist, the radiologist. Even the person calling to schedule your appointment can choose whether or not to speak to you.
Wow. That's wow. That's not good.
No,
That's not good
it'll
at
be the
all.
harshest in the US. If it gets passed, it'll be the harshest in the US. And it's being it's being pushed by a retired nurse in my county.
That's a
Yep.
lot to
Yeah,
take in.
it's
Yep.
heavy. This has
That's
been
a
very
lot.
heavy,
Yeah,
and
this is a lot. Yeah, especially what you just the last thing that you just mentioned is a lot to take in because it's going to be
hmm
a very, I mean, horrifying trickle effect,
Yep.
right?
It's a
So,
horrifying, and I'm hoping that one doesn't make it because I just
oh yeah, me
as
too.
healthcare providers, I can't possibly think that we're going to pass something that allows. I can't believe we do the religious. To be honest, I wouldn't even in healthcare. My belief is that your patient comes first before your religious ideologies, before your political ideologies, before anything else. Do no harm. That is
yes,
why
do
you
no
go
harm.
into that is why you go into
hmm
healthcare is to do no harm. So your whatever your feelings are should never reflect onto your patient. So I
Mm-hmm.
would never turn away a trans patient. But the fact that we're thinking about creating this bill that says that's okay, it's not okay.
Mm.
Yeah, it's scary.
Thank you, Amber. That was
You're
heavy.
welcome.
Oh my God. I hope you guys took in that today Sunday Live is very informative. It's about opening the conversation, having a dialogue for awareness, for knowledge, for questioning, to ask questions. So, everybody, from me, have a good Sunday. And Gail, do you want to say anything in closing?
No, I just want to thank Amber for coming on the
Yes. Thank you,
show.
Amber.
Absolutely.
We really, really appreciated you saying yes, appreciated your conversation, for keeping it real.
Yes.
Yep.
And as I told you before, I think you're a very brave person to
Thank you.
step out, not only for your son, but for other people as well, because it's needed. And we are
Yes.
Right.
all human beings. At the end of the day, we are all
Oh,
human beings just trying to live together and get along together,
yes, ma'am.
regardless of our personal choices. And I
Right.
don't think I should be discriminated against because of a
Yes.
personal choice. So I just wanted to
Right.
thank you very much.
You're
Thank
welcome. And
you.
thank you both for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this again. Like, I think this is how we lower the temperature in the
Yes.
country
Yes.
on this topic is you just keep talking
Talking
about it.
about it. Yes,
And so,
ma'am.
I mean, that's the reason why I have my room is, and half the time my room's not even parents. Half the time my
Yeah.
room is just people in the community who either support trans or they want to learn more about it. And I'm
Want to learn
perfectly okay
more.
with those people in my space too, because again, the more we learn, the more
Yeah.
inclusive we will be.
Right,
Right.
exactly. All right, that was the word for today. Thank you, everybody. Amber, stay
Thank you.
tuned. Don't hang up. Because everybody, when we say that, everybody just logs
Ah,
off.
yeah.
So everybody have a good Sunday and take care. And
Yep. Thanks for
Happy
coming.
July 4th.
See you. Bye.
Bye.